everybody. It is good to see you all and see so many friendly faces and people I've known for a long time and people I have yet to know. Welcome to Becoming Good Ancestors, religious education online. Let me just express my gratitude to you, the membership, for helping us make this decision to move online all the way back in January when COVID cases were peaking. It seems like we're in that stage again. And for those of us in America also grieving the day after tremendous tragedy. So thank you for being here amidst the many things that are going on in your lives and to invite the ancestors together. And we are going to practice in the material first because there's no better way to practice this invitation of our ancestors before getting to know one another, getting to know how we invite each other into this space and into this room. So here's what we're going to do over the course of this kind of opening session to introduce us to this conference, to this theme, is we're going to spend a little time getting to know one another in smaller groups so we can have a little bit of that time because I miss you all in person. There's no way to give you virtual hugs. So we're going to do our best to give small group time for folks to answer a few questions together, think through what does it mean to become good ancestors, specifically within the Religious Education Association. And then we're going to do a little bit of a practice together, and then we're going to debrief and enjoy the rest of the morning, afternoon, evening, day, night, wherever you are. We have all the time zones. Is that cool? Can I get nods, like some affirmation? Virtual affirmation is harder to read the room when you're virtual. Okay, cool. All right, so here's what we're going to do. I'm going to invite you first to, we're going to break into small groups. You got 2 questions, but I'm going to post them in the chat. And this is, who are the ancestors that you know in REA? The ones that are not here, this is, I'm talking about actual ancestors that have brought you to this space. That's going to be the first one. So say who you are when you get in there and what in your small group and who or what ancestor brought you to this space, to REA. Who can you name from REA that is not here? And give that a little bit of time to have a conversation with your colleagues. Is that cool? Yeah? All right, here we go. I'm going to assign breakouts. You'll get a prompt right now. If you don't, that's okay. You get to hang out with me here. You too. Well, this could be a group. Let's just call this a group then. Who you are and what REA ancestor brings you to space. It's okay if you can't name one. I can model Patrick Reyes. I was looking through past journals, and there was a special journal edition that was done in honor of Frey's work. And thinking about all the folks who wrote who are not here in that issue, which is really, it was just a gift to see that we've been doing this type of work for a while and that I'm not alone. So I was grateful for that. All right, who's up? Who you are, REA ancestor, calling into space.
I can go. I'm Catherine Turpin, and probably I would name Chuck Foster, who's not yet among the ancestors in that sense, but certainly is the person who's responsible for my being in religious education at all or being here at the REA.
Others, Peter, Tiffany.
I'm Peter Cariaga. I'm sorry, Pat, besides the REA ancestor, what was that, where we are?
You got the first part, right? Yeah, your name.
Okay. And I'm in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, and kind of like Catherine, my ancestor is really an elder, at least to me. Dory Baker, who's the reason that I'm here in the REA. Last year was my first REA event. I've only been a member of the association for a couple of years, so I'm still getting to know not only those who are present, but also those who are past and still present in a sense, in multiple senses, really. So I'll name Dory and anticipate getting to know others.
Hi, I'm Tiffany. I found out about REA from Patrick Reyes. So Not an ancestor, but certainly certainly a big brother to me. And but I will name a religious education ancestor of my own, Ethel Jean Jackson, who was just somebody who took me so seriously as a little girl at church and talked to me as an 8-year-old about what I read in the Bible, and just encouraged me to be creative at church, singing, dancing, doing plays. And Ethel Jean Jackson was a really special person. And I'm in Champaign, Illinois, visiting my parents and checking on them.
Kathy, Ron, Sierra, Amy, Lakeisha. The question is who you are, and then an REA ancestor brought you to the space.
I guess I'll go. Excuse me. My first name is Sierra Marie, and my last name is Jerfeo. I'm in New Haven, Connecticut, and I have been an REA member for a while, but I haven't attended any of the conferences or done anything in the years. So I am just now getting to know people, and so I can't name an REA ancestor, but I will also name a religious education ancestor, somebody who became an ancestor far too soon, Alandria Williams, who really influenced my ideas about community making in religious education.
Okay, I guess I'll go. Kathy Winings. I'm here in upstate New York. I've been involved in REA since '89. Guess the person that introduced me to REA is actually Kieran Scott. He's my professor. He and my first view of education, religious education, was my first Sunday school teacher, actually. I have no idea what her name was. I can't remember anything. Anything before my brain aneurysm is gone. So forget that. But yeah, so Kieran introduced me to REA when I was a student, and I responded.
Thank you, Kathy. It's good to see you. Time for a few more. Lakeisha, Dr. Junker, we just, the invitation is your name and REA ancestor, someone you would name that brought you into the space. We have just a few more minutes before we call everyone back.
Well, I guess I can go. I'm kind of, can you hear me okay?
We can.
Okay. This is Lakeisha Lockhart. I'm actually en route with my little one. And so if I had to name an ancestor, for me, even though I don't think she was not directly related to REA, it would be Bell Hooks. Just her work and who she is has been and continues to be a big influence on my life.
Patrick has a car full of kids. What's up, Patrick? And what's up to all your kids?
Hi, I'm Amy Valdez Barker, and I am a religious educator at Candler School of Theology. I came to REA many, many years ago when I was working on my PhD at Garrett Evangelical Theological Seminary, and Jack Seymour and Margaret Ann Crane were the ones who really sort of connected me to REA, and my advisor was Dr. Reggie Blunt. So yes, they shared with me back then that REA is a much kinder and gracious sort of community for engaging with colleagues than say other conferences. So I'm excited to kind of get back into the academic world and engage with REA.
Thank you. Barbara, did you want to go before we close out here?
Since I am a fashionably late, having difficulty logging on.
We've been gathering. This is a surprise party for you. No, I'm just joking. This
Thank
is we're glad you're here. It's just who you are, and then an REA ancestor that brought you to this space.
Oh, I am Barbara Fears, Assistant Professor of Religious Education at Howard University School of Divinity. And I too attended Garrett Evangelical Theological Seminary and joined, I believe, when I was a doctoral student, if not before, experienced AAR, and Jack Seymour was my doctoral advisor, and I believe he was the one who encouraged me to join REA. And I think I started with Atlanta in, was it 2012, 2014, somewhere in that area? Yep, those were the days.
Back in person. That was right. That was the one that's right across the street from that big mall, right? In Atlanta. Yeah.
One must shop.
That's right. That's right. Well, thank you all for sharing. Ron, did you want to go before we get everyone back? You look very intent.
Hi, I'm Ron. I live in Rotterdam, the Netherlands. I don't really have I'm completely new to REA, more because of we're in the Dutch Research Center for Youth, Church and Culture. And Jos de Kok introduced us to this world to see whether the connections are between RE and youth ministry. So I'm learning.
Thank you, Ron. We're glad you're here. And welcome back to those who are coming back. Deep move. All right. So here's the next move. So this is, if you are just joining REA, we've been in a few years, not just because of the pandemic, but a few years of transition. We've had transition in leadership. We've had transition from seasons, when this event takes place, when we come together, how we come together, who's been in and out of leadership. And one of the things that is so clear to me, if you haven't read in all the recent issues of the journal, is that there is a moment of cultural repair. And for me, that comes from knowing ancestors who are not my own. So I'm glad you spent the first few minutes really celebrating who your people are, who brought you to this space, who invited you in, those loving ancestors. But there's so much about each other that we have yet to know. And sometimes it takes us going on a journey, doing a little search. So here's what's going to happen in this next move. And this will be the last move before we do a little meditation and get into a big group. To do this is we need a list of ancestors that you don't yet know. You all have internet. This is a virtual conference. You would never do this in person in class, but I'm going to challenge you to go back into your small groups when I open them back up and find an ancestor that none of you know. That might mean opening up the journal and just flipping through, thinking about those historic times like I did for this conference. What was happening in 1903 or 1904 when this first kind of launched? What was happening during World War II? What was happening during the conflict in Vietnam? Like, what was happening in the civil rights era in 68? What was the time? Maybe go back and look at our wiki page. We have a wiki page. Did you know that? We are pretty famous, I guess. Famous enough to be on Wikipedia. So if you get in your small group, find a common ancestor that no one yet knows. So that means having a conversation about and making relations to people that you have not yet been connected. Is this task clear? Can we do this as religious educators? Are you up to it? I don't know if you are. It's early in the morning. We good? I'm seeing sort of smiles, half smiles. All right, I'm going to open up these things. We'll see what happens. You'll have about 10 minutes. And then when we come back to the big group, I want to hear who these ancestors that we do not yet know who they are. All right. So you have one and report out. We good? Thumbs up. Give me thumbs up. Waves. All right. Look at this. I have an exercise room on Zoom. All right. The rooms are back open. All right, this is my group. Are y'all waiting on me? I don't know the people I don't know yet. Who wants to take leadership in this group? Ancestor who we do not yet know. Ron, since you said this is your first time, you might be able to bring someone to us that's not in our journals. I'm just thinking that might be a potential pathway. Y'all can take yourself off mute.
I'm still checking out, so give me a sec.
Almeida, it's good to see you.
Likewise, I got knocked off and then I had to come find a new wave to get back.
Hey, that's the way of life, right?
It's the way of Zoom.
It's the way of parenting. It's the way of taking care of parents. It's everything. Who's an ancestor we do not yet know?
Pat, is this an ancestor that we've never heard of before, or
Sure,
somebody
you
that
shouldn't
we
have.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Challenging, right? Got to search. It's not supposed to be easy. The clue is looking at my face will not help you. So,
I just found a Richard Upshur Smith who
Who?
edited a journal related to religion and public education, the public school curriculum, and was the National Council on Religion and Public Education director.
What?
Sort of in the, looks like late 60s, early 70s, which, you know, that's something I care a lot about is public schooling and religion, how those are working together or not.
Catherine, what does it say that what was Richard writing about? What was his take or
It just says that he the REA took the leadership in forming the National Council on Religion and Public Education, and he edited an issue of the journal on the religion and the public school curriculum.
Mm.
And I'm looking in the Yale archives at this point.
Can you drop in the chat who that person is so we can all I think you just offered us our person so we can all become experts on Richard Upshur Smith.
Here's the page. He's sort of in the middle of this long conversation. Let's see if I could get his name too.
Oh, very cool.
There are other people named in that article that may be good for us too. They're named in that page.
All right, as the rest of the group goes through this, think about if Richard is a good ancestor.
I feel at a disadvantage. I'm in Chicago and not at home with my books.
Yeah, I feel you. I'm doing the internet searches right now. I'm going through. There's a lot of Richard Smiths. It's a very common name.
Of course, now I'm lost. I'm like, are we supposed to be researching more on him? Okay.
Yeah, if you can, I think he'll be a good start. Unless you have someone else, Almeida, you're thinking make for a good ancestor.
It's just a different way that I was going.
Cool.
One of the more recent archives is the Black Teacher Archives at Harvard. And one of the people that they talk about there is Tessie McGee. It's also, the religion part is more like embedded in their work instead of explicit, just because of the nature of the Harvard archives. But
Can you drop their name and maybe a link to the Harvard archives? That'd be really cool.
Yep.
You know, we also did the book. Remember that we all did articles on all these, what was it, up to 100 different religious educators, the bios on them. And there were some fascinating people in that list that we don't talk about very much anymore.
Kathy, are you talking about the project that was at Talbot School of Theology? Yeah, cool.
Yeah, the one that Kevin started there.
Yeah, let me drop that.
Because I did one, I know, on Norma Thompson, and I had a lovely discussion with her up at when she was living in Great Barrington. You know, that she used to teach at NYU. A wonderful person with a great fount of understanding.
Amita, while I pull that up, can you tell us a little bit about Tessie, what you're learning or what you're reading?
So she's one of the teachers who kind of is centered in Jarvis Giving's new book, Fugitive Pedagogy, where he highlights the that tradition in African-American teaching, primarily centering Carter G. Woodson's work. But it's not a book about Carter G. Woodson per se as a teacher, but more so about people using Carter G. Woodson. I don't know if that's me or you. Carter G. Woodson's teaching tools. So he has history books. And so Tessie McGee is one of these teachers who, because at this point in African-American public education, it was illegal to teach something that was not part of the colonizing apartheid curriculum. And therefore she's one of these teachers who is highlighted as like having the main text of the day on the table and Carter G. Woodson's history book, A History of African-American People, like in her lap. And so she was teaching 2 lessons to these students at the same time. And so this was also something that Jarvis Givens found in like a basement or church kind of like attic archive, a video of this older African-American telling about his teacher, who was Tessie McGee, who was teaching Carter G. Woodson's history book.
That's really cool. So it sounds like we might have we got 2.
I vote we go with Tessie.
Tessie? Cool. Part of the invitation will be to kind of talk about why this person is a good ancestor, why they're in here, and tell their story a little bit into the big space. So, I mean, if you're feeling comfortable with that, I mean, I would love for you to pick it up. I mean, I can't do what you just did.
No volunteering gone unpunished. Sure, I'll do it.
Cool. Thank you. All right. So just to kind of, since we got our person, just to kind of stir up conversation while I broadcast out this thing, what would make, after hearing that bio, after hearing the story, what would make that person a good ancestor? What do we think? Emphasis on good.
For me, I mean, just someone who sort of understands what's going on for the community that she's educating, and despite the barriers that were thrown up in front of her, she was using the power she had in the space that she had to teach what was necessary to the students she had, which is pretty impressive.
Yeah. Others? One thing stands out to me, I mean, as you were doing it, and actually even on Richard, here. The amount of data we have on people is pretty incredible. That the bios that have been doing, and the fact that I'm not as familiar with this project or those names is a little sad to me. That it's clearly a good ancestor that I need to connect with.
And that I think is one of the gifts of this new archive at Harvard, and Jarvis Given's work, and he's kind of leading it with Amani Perry from Princeton. Part of the work, because I've done research on Black teachers like my whole life, and most of this stuff had been lost to, basements or smaller collections that weren't as readily available, or just lost. Like, people didn't think that it was important to tell these stories and keep them, which is also why I think, in terms of us trying to reclaim ancestors that we don't know,
Right.
it's such a powerful exercise, partly because so much of the reclamation work, or the kind of like archival work, is trying to piece together lives from receipts and napkins and snippets and newspaper clippings.
And in my own work, I mean, just the importance of scholars, because they're the ones who have the time, capacity, skills, resources to actually do that work. Yeah. Cool. Well, I'm going to invite the rest back. Let me express my gratitude. I mean, to thank you for bringing this ancestor to us.
And Kathy, thank you for Richard, because I now want to know more about him too.
Yeah.
That wasn't me.
Kathy Turpin, sorry.
Oh, Turpin. Yeah, wrong Kathy. Sorry.
I'm sorry, Catherine.
Welcome back. Welcome back. Can't one sing that well? Welcome back. No. No one's going to volunteer. Fine.
Too early in the morning to sing. Let the voice warm up a bit.
That's right. Welcome back to the big group. Coming back with your ancestors, both known and unknown. So we are going to get a chance to meet some of yours. Here's the invitation next. Is part of the thought behind this exercise is really to get us to start thinking about this act of cultural repair, this act of reclaiming and recovering our ancestors, our lost ancestors, those who we don't yet know. Not only repairs our lineages, but brings us as a group of scholars, as a group of practitioners together, start thinking about who do we need to think about, who is a good ancestor. So we have a number of rooms, and all I'm asking for is someone from your room to name who you found, who's your good ancestor that you are reclaiming and recovering. Give us a little bit of why they're a good ancestor, who they are, and what about their life captured your imagination. Is that clear? Cool. And to model, I think our group can go first. Is that okay? All right.
All righty. Good morning. I think it's still morning, at least in my time zone, everyone. Our ancestor, or the one that we lifted up, was Tessie McGee. And Tessie McGee is a name that I'd never encountered until I read Jarvis Given's new work, Fugitive Pedagogy. And the description of Tessie McGee that Jarvis Givens gives is that she was a teacher who read to her class. She's 28 years old, African-American woman in Louisiana. And she read to her class from Carter G. Woodson's history book around African-American history. And she had to do it in a subversive way. She was one who knew that there was repercussions for teaching something that was not part of the colonizing pedagogy of a racist apartheid South, and instead would have two curriculum going on. One that was the standard one outlined on the board, and then the other was where she would read snippets to the class of history from African Americans or about African Americans to empower her segregated all Black class and students. And so this was a woman who now is available to us. More of her story is available to us because of a Black Teacher Archive project at Harvard Graduate School of Education. But prior to them amassing this information and Jarvis Gibbons doing this groundbreaking research, I'd never even heard of her name, even though there was an idea that there were teachers, lots of teachers who are named and unnamed who were doing work like this. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Almeda. And thank you, Tessie McGee, for her work. Next group, I can go by rooms if you need me to. But if someone would like to volunteer, that would be great.
I'll share from room 7. We named a number of our really formative ancestors. So our caregivers, our early teachers, our grandmothers, and also, and we named a lot of you who are in this room, whose faces I'm looking at right now as part of our theoretical and practical lineage. We also talked about those ancestors we really don't know, who were with us through generations of annual meetings and kind of slipped in and slipped out, or presented a single paper and maybe showed up every year and just listened, or you know, just kind of hung around the edges. And so I want to lift up the memory of those folks who have been part of the REA who we don't know.
Thank you, room 7. Yeah. So those who have come, maybe done a paper or two, hung out with us, shared a meal, and then haven't participated. Good ancestors among us that we did not know. Who else? Let's get another group.
Well, I can go for room 1.
Cool.
This is Maureen O'Brien, and we benefited from the Biola Christian educators of the 20th century as the place to scan, and realize just how many ancestors were there that we maybe didn't know at all, or we knew the name and not much else. And so we settled on Iris Cully, who was a name that some of us knew but didn't know so much about, and that others of us didn't know at all. And Iris Cully was a pioneer in a number of ways in religious education. And so what we learned just through that initial investigation was she had a lot of firsts to her name, besides many considerable achievements in the scholarship of religious education, writings and teachings. But she was the first woman to earn a doctorate in religion from Northwestern University, the first woman on faculty at Yale Divinity School, the first professor in any Disciples of Christ school, and the first woman president of the Association of Professors and Researchers in Religious Education. So we were impressed with the number of firsts, and as was commented in the group, learning about ancestors is very much about looking for good clues, not necessarily feeling you're going to get the whole picture of anyone, but that the clues intrigue us and draw us in and help us to think more about the kinds of clues we want to leave for next generations as well.
Thank you, Maureen. Thank you, group 1.
I'll jump in for group 3, which was Melissa, Joyce, and Rochelle, and myself. And we started by going to the REA wiki page and decided that we would just look for a name that we did not know. And there we found the name of Helen Allen Archibald, who is not on the Biola page. We discovered that she wrote her dissertation in 1975 on George Albert Coe, But what's really interesting that we found is that she had written a guide for the study of Negro history in the churches in 1963. So we're kind of intrigued by that. And she also wrote a guide for children on those same things. So that was we found that to be a really interesting and intriguing. We couldn't find much more about her, but she did write an article in 2003 for the Religious Ed Journal called Originating Visions and Visionaries of the REA. So she's a historian, clearly, and offering some perspective in that way. So I think the four of us are kind of intrigued and say, maybe we ought to learn more about this ancestor who's still alive, supposedly, and would be 96 at this time.
How cool. Thank you.
I can go from group 6. So we looked on Wikipedia as well and found many names, many of which we recognized and have impacted us in various ways. Many names that we didn't recognize. So it was kind of it was helpful for us, I think, to see all those names. We also began to start thinking about the question in terms of who was underappreciated in REA, whose legacies are and shadows loom large over the field, but who don't always get the recognition that they deserve. And the name that surfaced was Ann Wimberly, as somebody who I think many of us have read, many of us know personally, but doesn't always get the same level of appreciation or credit of some of the ideas and the legacy that she's provided to the field. In particular, soul stories, which many of us know well, but it's also it's had such a profound impact, and many doesn't always get the same level of it's not, her name is not always associated or connected to that. Sorry. The other part would be just the fact that she's been so influential also in raising up mentors and being connected to people, being a mentor for so many people who have been in the field, and has been so generous with her time. I think that legacy has also been critical to the field, and has created has enriched religious education greatly as a result. And also the fact that she was the first president of APRE and REA when it combined, at least according to Wikipedia, which I didn't realize that, which is a profound thing in and of itself. Just the fact that history I didn't know. So yeah, she was the first when APRE and REA combined, according to Wikipedia at least. She was the first president. So which is very, very cool. So yeah, just that wasn't. That's how we were interpreting it in terms of levels of recognition and names that we want to make sure are getting the recognition that they deserve. And so, and again, not just in academics, but also in a spirit of compassion, generosity, and inclusivity that we hope is a major part of the and has been a major part of the organization.
Ann Wimberly, thank you. Group 6. I still got a few more here. 2458. 2458.
I will jump in as half for group 4. I say half because Jennifer Moe and I kind of turned into detectives. I was on the Biola page and she was on the Wikipedia page, and we're like, look at all these people we don't know. So I will name Edna Mae Baxter. She kind of feels like a name that I should know. And this is from the Biola University. I'll just read the first couple of lines. She was a Methodist who was the first woman to serve full-time as a teacher of religious education in a theological seminary, where her interests included early childhood education, curriculum development, the teaching of the Bible to children and youth, and multiracial, multicultural, and multinational relations. So that is Edna Mae Baxter. And Jennifer Moe's got the other one.
Hi, this is Jennifer Moe. I apologize that you can't see my face because I am way too close to my phone. So you don't want to see just my eyeball. So my I found mine through our Wikipedia page, the religious education Wikipedia page, where I became interested in the fact that two presidents of the University of Chicago, one of them was a founder of REA, and the other was a president, became a president of REA. And through that research, found a not so great story about this REA president that led me to a great story about the first African American woman PhD student, first Black woman to graduate with a PhD in the United States. And her name was Georgiana Simpson. And she graduated with a PhD at the age of 55 from the University of Chicago. Her interests were in German language and literature. It doesn't say in subsequent articles about her what her PhD was in. Perhaps they didn't list that at the time. They celebrated their 100-year anniversary of her receiving the PhD in 2021. So it was in 1921 that she received her PhD from the University of Chicago. Georgiana Simpson.
Georgiana Simpson. Thank you, Jennifer. That's awesome. $258.
I could speak for Group 8. This is John Anderson. We began, like several of the other groups did, by looking up the Wikipedia page and then going to the Biola page. And we talked about searching for people we did not know. Virginia Lee lifted up two female scholars, Nellie Morton and Maria Hayes. We talked a little bit about Thomas Groom as an ancestor that had been important to a number of us, but and then we settled in, and then I shared a name that's been important to me in my history. This gentleman doesn't fall into the categories of people who often get omitted from our conversation. So in retrospect, maybe this isn't such a great name, but there was a gentleman named Merton Strumman who worked at Augsburg College and then ultimately worked with a group called Search Institute. And Merton cared about children, youth, and family in a deep way, wrote some books called Five Cries of Youth, and led several big studies about faith formation. So that was where we settled around and talked around in Group 8. Thanks.
Thank you, John. 2 and 5.
I can jump in for Group 2, but I'll need a little help from my group members. One person we mentioned was Jun Kwan Un, who is listed in the 20th century religious educators. He was a Korean Methodist minister and Christian educator who did some significant work on relationship between education and commitment and praxis education, extremely influential in development of Korean religious educator. Mark Hearn mentioned him. Mark, did you want to say anything else about him?
Just that he did this work between being a minister of the oldest Methodist church in Korea, and then also was a professor at Yonsei University, a faculty member. And he was really kind of the foremost figure to, according to Boyoung, who wrote the page, said that he was foremost in conceptualizing Christian education as a theological discipline and situating it front and center in Korea. So we have many thanks to give to him.
And Mayan mentioned somebody who isn't on the Viola page, and that's Lucy Ryder Meyer, who I hadn't actually heard of. Mayan, did you want to add a word about her? No, she's not here. And we also just talked about, you know, people in our family, our grandmothers or, you know, and so much of religious education is done within a family context. And people from just our connections, like Tom in our group mentioned Jim from L'Arche, who, as a member of the L'Arche community, he was somebody that educated him about how to enter into relationships with others. Tom, did you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, but just to add that, you know, talking about my friend Jim, and Mark had mentioned his mom, and it just got us, and it was really, I think, Mayan that sort of stepped us outside of REA or outside of the sort of discourse of religious education, even to just start thinking about those who whose voices don't often get heard, maybe in this space or in the general scholarly discourse. So it was good conversation for us.
Thank you.
Patrick, I don't know what group number we were in, my group, but one of the things that we looked at the Wikipedia entry, and knowing that REA was founded by a multi-religious group of people, we were trying to figure out who was the first non-Christian who had been president. And we settled on Francis Greenwood Peabody, who is a Unitarian. And that, of course, led to a rather long conversation about, whoops, I guess I put the wrong link in. Sorry, I was going to put the link for Peabody in. A long conversation about what does it mean and how was the, what would it have been to be a Unitarian at the time, writing about Christian pieces, or what does it mean now, the distinctions between Christianity and Unitarian communities, because it's kind of both and. But I do think we echoed what some other folks have already said, which was who wasn't on these lists, and how do we get access to ancestors that we know shaped who we are, but weren't kept in these kinds of databases.
Thank you, Mary. It was group 10. We got 9 and 5. 2 more.
Maybe I'll take the liberty of inviting Mary, Elizabeth, and Trenton to insert something, because I don't think I'll do it very well. I was asking whether people had Canadian ancestors, because I'm a Canadian, and whether there were people who had affected them outside of REA. So at first, Trenton sort of broadened our scope to beyond REA, maybe because he knows everyone in REA, I don't know, and I don't know anybody, but, well, maybe not anybody. But he certainly has a history with our organization. And so by broadening it, we introduced other people, like I introduced some constructive theologians, since that's more my area, and especially a queer theologian who I've been writing a lot about, myself being a straight but queer theologian. I'll let you play with that one. And yeah, do you guys want to say anything else? Anyone from group 5? I'm stuck.
I might add that Cheryl's question led us to highlight Guiran Ing and the huge contribution she's made to REA and religious education over many, many years, both in terms of writing about and encouraging others to write about diverse Asian ancestries, and also diversification of the organization. She's been a major leader in that for at least 40 years.
And I also liked your approach, Mary Elizabeth, about your learnings from younger REA members. Do you want to say a bit about that? I really enjoyed that.
Cheryl, do you mind saying that again? Sorry.
Sure, you
About your
made a
younger-
comment about younger ancestors who you were meeting, newer members, and you made some comments about that were interesting.
I'm not sure which comment, but I'll say that two of us in our group said that some of the most important ancestors to us in REA are the younger scholars. We feel as if we're learning a great deal from the younger scholars, and they are mentoring those of us who are older in the field. I also had a huge memory of Maria Harris in the first meeting where I presented a paper, treating me as if I was an equal and helping me to see the strengths in my paper that I didn't even see.
Thank you. No pressure on group 9, but you got to bring us home. This better be amazing. I know everyone in that group.
I'll go ahead. I guess we didn't know what number we were. I had absolutely no idea what number we were. But there were 3 people we talked about, 2 that profoundly affected the early professors organization in REA. And those 2 people were Grant Shockley and Olivia Pearl Stokes. Probably the first strong voices for recovering the African American story in religious education in the United States. And but both of them were important folks in the 60s, 70s, and 80s for the field. We also then talked about a parallel person who was the first voice of REA that did the same story for Mexican Americans, and that was Virgil Elizondo, whose work on Mestizaje and Galilean Journey. So Olivia Pearl Stokes, Grant Shockley, and Virgil Elizondo. Virgil attended REA, I think, in the late 70s and early 80s. I don't think after that. So these are all folks that, honestly, there's a couple old people in the room like me who knew them personally. But the bottom line is they really are ancestors for our field.
Thank you, Jack. And thank you for each group. I mean, one of the gifts of the diversity of these voices is just to lift up the searching and the wealth of knowledge we have because folks wrote stuff down or capture receipts. And that was one of the great things about being part of a professional guild like REA is that we do that work. We are the folks who capture these stories. That way, those breadcrumbs, those receipts, those trails, those stories get captured and remembered. And just as to lift up at least what I heard and took down in numbers, for those who have been left out of the record, the folks we don't know enough about, majority were women. So let's, fellas, a step up, and grateful for lifting that up as a thing, as a gift that we can offer to the broader scholarship. So thank you to everyone for lifting up ancestors we don't yet know. Just to say, in terms of pedagogy here, one of the original ideas was for us to just invoke all of our ancestors, call out the names of those who we love and value. And I said, we're going to hear a lot of familiar names a lot of the time. So if we could do a little more research, that's what we're about. That's what REA is about, is to get curious about one another. And I hope you carry that curiosity throughout this conference. And you got a wealth of knowledge and databases in your colleagues here to ask those questions, to meet new ancestors, and to fall in love with one another. All right, so here's how we're going to wrap it up as we kick off into this. I have a visualization exercise. So I'm going to invite you all to turn off your cameras and get comfortable. And we're going to stay on theme here with the ancestors. We'll do this visualization exercise, and then we will turn off the recording. For anyone who wants to stay around and do a little bit of debrief, they can, but this will be kind of our closing for this opening session. So if you can, close your eyes, take a deep breath in, deep breath out. Deep breath in. Deep breath out. I want you to imagine that you are standing in front of a building, a museum. See that building in front of you. It's your dream building. What does it look like? What's the architecture? See this building in front of you and see yourself walking on a path up to its front door. And as you approach this front door, I want you to see right above that front door, it has your name. This is your museum. I want you to open that door, cross its threshold. You have now stepped into the museum, the archives, the place where you have left your legacy. What does it look like on the inside? What are the colors of the wall? What type of flooring did you pick out? What artwork do you have up? Just take a look at how you might design your museum. Now, as you walk into the main space, I want you to start imagining how you might populate it with the artifacts of your life. What are the things that mattered to you? The things you built, things you participated in. See them on display. These things could be those books that you wrote, those articles, it could be calendars, it could be all the meetings, all the appointments that you've ever been in. Be a weird museum, but see all the things. Maybe it's scratches of paper, notes of books you haven't written, presents from friends, gifts from your office. What is in your museum? Populate it. As your museum fills up with things that represent your life, your legacy, I want you now to populate the museum with people. Who would come to see what you have done? To look at the gifts you've given the world? Who is interested in your work? What do the people look like? How are they moving about the space? Now, as you see these folks who are enjoying your museum, this exhibit that's dedicated to your life, I want you to see a door at the end of a hallway or the end of this exhibit that says private above it. And I want you to walk towards that door in your mind's eye, passing the many people that are in your exhibit. See yourself approaching this door that reads private on the top. Now, in your mind's eye, see yourself opening that door and entering into the room that is your private collection. These are the things that were not for the public. Gifts that you have kept for yourself or those who you love. walk into this room and see what are those artifacts? What are the things that you have kept to you or to those who have a key to this office? What items do you place in this room? Could be photographs, childhood, videos of memory, toys. Little love letters to a friend, to a partner. What do you put in your private office, private space? Now, as you spend time in this space that's just dedicated to you, I want you to pass through one more door. You see a door that doesn't lead back into the museum with your public artifacts. It doesn't lead into your private capturing of your legacy, these little moments and artifacts that are just for you and your loved ones. I want you to see another door that leads to what we call sanctuary. Pass through that door one last time into a space where you feel safe. Place where you are whole and recognized as whole. Spend just a moment here where you are surrounded by, gifted by safety, love, presence, and pay attention to what is in this space. In your sanctuary. Take just a moment more in this place of sanctuary. Now you see yourself coming back into that private space, leaving your sanctuary, come back to your private space. Notice what's in that room, pass through it. See yourself exiting your building, going through this exhibit that I'm sure is teeming with the public, people who are enjoying the artifacts that you have left. See yourself leaving the building. And once again, find yourself at the front door, staring at this building, this magical place with your name on it. And as you're ready, you can come back. I want to thank you for spending some time this morning with this group, sharing ancestors that we don't yet know. My invitation for the rest of the week is to live into those three spaces at REA. Live into the space that you're curating publicly for this group as a scholar, as a practitioner. Think about those artifacts, those conversations that you're leaving, those conversations you're having with presenters. Think about those things you're reserving for yourself. Maintain your own energy, that private space, those things that maybe don't need a public audience that you want to keep for the archivist. And remember to find sanctuary. Drink lots of water, hydrate, eat well, enjoy each other's company in sanctuary. And thank you for sharing your museums with all of us. enjoy REA this week. I'll be here for a few more minutes if you want to talk about this, but enjoy the week. It's so good to see all of you. Thank you.